Greetings for week number 2 of our reading from Genesis to Revelation. So far, things have been going well. At least I've heard from you in that way. Many of you are reading along online through YouVersion.com, and some of you are just receiving the email on a daily basis that allows you to kind of see what the reading is and to keep up with it that way. Either way is very good. Do what is best for you, and continue to make sure that you're keeping up with things. Make a time. Maybe it's morning that you set aside a few minutes, or maybe it's the evening, or maybe it's lunchtime. Maybe take 15 minutes out of your lunch and to plow through some of this reading and to have time to kind of not only read it but think about it. I think that's important a little bit as we go along. You may very well be in the case where maybe you spend a couple hours one day and read it all at one time. I'm not sure that there is a best way except the way that works for you. So I encourage you to find that and just to stick to it. We are in the Old Testament, and we're beginning to kind of pick up speed here, and there's lots of names and places and things that are going on, and it's a different culture, isn't it? It's a way different culture. They do things differently. They have different ideas about how their families should interact and what's going on, and sometimes we can make some judgments that that I think prevent us from really seeing what the Old Testament is all about. The Bible itself is about God revealing Himself through a particular people. And the Bible itself is a story of redemption. Now, the church has taken that word and has kind of adopted it as its own and made it very religious. Redemption really wasn't meant to be a religious term. It was simply meant, redemption was treating people the right way. Taking people who had no one else to care for them and care for them. Taking people who are outside of society because of circumstances perhaps beyond their control and making sure they had a place within society, that they could be productive citizens and they could be cared for from cradle to grave. Redemption is really about how people who have no other hope or help are helped by a group of people, not because they're blood related, but because they're grace filled. And that's really what redemption is. One of the great helps to me in terms of Old Testament helps is this book called The Epic of Eden that's written by Sandy Richter. And Sandy does a great job. She's an Old Testament professor, was formerly at Asbury Theological Seminary. She does a great job of kind of bringing things down on a level that we can all understand. I've got several copies of this book if you'd like it, and we can make those available if just let me know. But Sandy really to hits at this idea of redemption, and it's about people who are outside society and vulnerable being cared for by the mainstream of society, and she makes the case that in a tribal system, redemption was something that always had to be talked about. Now, the Israelites were a tribal system. They were based on a patriarchal system, meaning the head of the household was the oldest living male. And it was through that patriarch that you had a place in society, an ability to make a living and earning, and also provided for in terms of inheritance. Your name in itself meant a great deal at that point in time. And that's why we read so many of these long passages that talk about Abraham's son was Isaac, and Isaac was Jacob, and Jacob was Reuben, and so on and so forth. And we tend to glaze over as we think, okay, let's just get on with it. What's the next chapter? For the Israelites, this was brutally important because this was how their identity and this is how their part of society was based upon, was who was the patriarch. And how I was related to the patriarch meant incredible importance to me. And so they spend a lot of time detailing that. So some of this we'll just kind of have to plow through, but others are very important. One of the things you're going to see about the genealogies, it's all men. And that's because the lineage was traced through the men, period. If you ever see a woman's name in a genealogy, you need to take a step back and you need to start asking questions. What's happening here? And what you're going to find more often than not, it's a fascinating story that is about redemption, because somewhere along the lines things broke down and there wasn't there was a vacuum of men in that situation, and the woman was allowed to play a major role that they normally weren't. And so anytime that you see a woman's name in genealogy, you need to take a step back and go, what's really going on here? For you see, everything was based on your relationship to the patriarch, and based on your gender, and based on your birth order. So men was how the lineage was handed down. From birth order, from oldest to youngest, was how you received your inheritance. The oldest son was next in line to become the patriarch. And so the oldest son, upon the patriarch's death, would receive a double inheritance, would receive 2 times what everyone else would get, because he would then become the patriarch and would be responsible to a larger group of people. Now, not only was your name wrapped up, but in who the patriarch was, but your very living quarters was wrapped up in who your patriarch was, because they all lived together in compounds. What would happen is, as sons would be born, and they would get to the point where they could to take wives, they would go and find a wife and bring the wife back, and begin to create other rooms on the house and create this compound they would all live in, and that would grow and grow until such a time that it became too big to really manage and to provide for everyone, and then at that point the household was split out. But until that point, you would live in your father's house. The Hebrew word for that is bet-abe, father's house, and it would be the bet-abe that you would belong to, and you would find your identity and you find your ability to be provided for. If you didn't have a bet-abe, you were outside of society. If you were a woman who was not married and whose father had passed away, you were extremely vulnerable. If you were an orphan, if your mom and dad had passed and you didn't have a place to belong, you were outside of society and very vulnerable. If you were not Hebrew, you could not belong to a bet-abe because you weren't part of that family, the blood family, and you were very vulnerable. And so God begins early on to start talking about these people that are outside our bet-abes, our family relationships. We need to have special care for them. To the widows, the orphans, the aliens, we need to make sure that we provide for them. And you're going to see that over and over again, that stories of redemption, providing for people who are outside the family as if they are inside the family, is going to be crucially important in some of the major storylines. Judah and Tamar, you're going to read this week, and it's a kind of a sordid story, but it's a story about a bet-abe, the importance of a bet-abe, and the importance of taking care of family, and those who have lost their standing in the family, bringing them back in. Encourage you. If you've got questions, please email, call, text me, whatever you need to do, and I'll help you as best I can and answer those questions and hopefully give a response to the entire reading community. Know that you're not alone in this. At this point, I think we have 9 people total, and there's more that we're adding and looking to add in the days ahead. So there's a group of us that are together. I pray for you on a regular basis and pray that your reading is not only builds knowledge but also transforms your heart, because that's really what we're about. You're going to start seeing foreshadowing of how God intends to care for us through the Israelite people. You're going to see God's real heart for the people who are outside of society and are unable to care for themselves. And that's going to point us towards a distinct moment in time that is Jesus on the cross and the resurrection. But let's not rush there too quickly. Let's settle into the stories of the Old Testament and be willing to maybe be a bit patient about this foreign culture that seems way different than ours, because it is. And I pray that we will have that patience and the perseverance. Let me know if I can help in any way, and we will be talking to you very soon.